The waitress overheard a conversation and brought the solution engineers had been seeking for years. Sarah Johnson nervously wiped her hands on her apron as she carried the coffee tray to table 15 at the Hilltop Diner. At 42, she had worked there for over a decade, but she had never seen those three men as agitated and desperate as they were that Thursday afternoon. It was when she heard the name that made her blood run cold. "Green Valley Dam," said the man with glasses, slamming his fist on the table. "If we don't solve the foundation issue by the end of the month, we'll have to halt the entire project. 2 years of work down the drain." Sarah nearly dropped the coffee cup she was serving. That name, she knew it all too well. It was the same dam her father, William Johnson, had obsessively talked about in the months before he passed. He scribbled numbers and sketches all over the house, muttering about foundation problems and calculation errors. "The deadline is running out, Ryan," continued the mustached man, who seemed to be the group's leader. "The company will sue us if we don't deliver a solution." "Dr. Harrison, we've tried everything," replied the youngest, a man in his 30s with messy hair. "We've redone the calculations dozens of times." Sarah stood there pretending to arrange the cups but hanging on every word. The third man, of Asian descent and deeply focused, spread some papers across the table. "The problem is right here, at this point," he said, pointing to a sheet full of numbers. "The ground can't support the structure's weight, but we can't find a solution that doesn't involve tearing it all down and starting over." Sarah's heart raced. Those numbers, that description. It was exactly what her father had tried to explain to her in his final weeks. William Johnson had been a brilliant self-taught engineer who learned the trade hands-on, working on projects across rural Colorado. Though he'd never set foot in a university, he had a natural gift for understanding structures and terrain. "Excuse me, would you like more coffee?" Sarah asked, trying to get closer to the table. Dr. Harrison barely glanced at her, just waving dismissively. Ryan, the younger one, was more polite. "Thank you, yes." As she poured, Sarah managed a quick glance at the papers. Her blood ran cold again. There, in front of her, was the exact same sketch her father had drawn every day. The same kind of calculations he'd scribbled in newspaper margins, and she could see the mistake clearly. "Miller Construction is losing patience," said the Asian man, whom the others called Lee. "If we don't present a solution by Friday, they'll cancel the contract. And our reputation in the industry will be ruined," Dr. Harrison added, running a hand through his hair. 3 years building this engineering firm, and now it could all go up in smoke over a problem we can't solve. Sarah finished serving and stepped away, but her mind was racing. She remembered her father's words perfectly. William always said the key to solving foundation issues on unstable ground wasn't just in traditional calculations, but in understanding how the earth behaved through the seasons. "Sweetheart," he used to say, "a real engineer is one who knows how to listen to what the land is saying." For the rest of the afternoon, Sarah couldn't focus on work. Every time she passed table 15, she caught more details. The Green Valley Dam project was massive, meant to supply the entire Denver metropolitan area. Over 500,000 people were counting on it. When she got home that night, Sarah went straight to her father's old room. After he passed away 6 months ago, she hadn't touched anything in there. The notebooks were still scattered across the table, filled with numbers, sketches, and notes in his small, meticulous handwriting. She spent hours searching until she found what she was looking for. There it was, an entire notebook dedicated to the Green Valley Dam. Her father had studied that project on his own, based on information he gathered online and conversations with former colleagues. On the first page, in large letters, he had written, "The mistake is in the foundation. They're not accounting for the water table." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Sarah spent the entire night reading her father's notebooks. William had mapped out the entire problem. The land where the dam was being built had very specific characteristics. During the rainy season, the water table rose significantly, altering the soil's stability. The engineers were basing their calculations solely on dry conditions, completely ignoring this seasonal variation. Her father's proposed solution was ingeniously simple. Instead of trying to make the land bear the full weight of the structure, They could redistribute the load using a floating foundation technique adapted to that specific soil. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work with a mission. She had spent the night copying the key points from her father's notebooks onto sheets of paper, translating the technical language into something simpler and clearer. The three engineers were there again at the same table with the same look of desperation. Dr. Harrison appeared not to have slept. Ryan was even more disheveled than the day before, and Lee was nervously tapping his fingers on the table. "Good morning. Can I get you some coffee?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sure, thanks," Ryan replied. As she poured, Sarah took a deep breath and gathered her courage. "Sorry to interrupt, but you're talking about the Green Valley Dam, right?" Dr. Harrison looked up, annoyed. "So what? That's none of your business. It's just—" Sarah hesitated for a moment but pressed on. "I think I might be able to help you." The three men exchanged glances. Dr. Harrison let out a bitter laugh. "Help? How?" "My father was an engineer. He studied this project before he passed. And he found the solution to your problem." The silence that followed was awkward. Dr. Harrison stared at Sarah as if she'd lost her mind. "Listen here, miss. We're engineers trained at the best universities in the country. We've been working on this project for 2 years. And you think, He paused, eyeing her uniform. "A waitress can solve a problem we can't?" Sarah felt her face burn with anger and humiliation, but she didn't back down. "My father may not have had a degree, but he understood construction better than many graduates. He worked his whole life with difficult foundations." "This is ridiculous," Dr. Harrison snapped, gathering his papers. "Lee, Ryan, let's go. We don't have time for nonsense." Ryan, however, seemed thoughtful. "Wait, Dr. Harrison. It doesn't hurt to listen. If we can't solve it, maybe nothing." Dr. Harrison stood abruptly. "I won't demean our profession by taking advice from someone completely unqualified." He stormed off, followed by Lee, who looked embarrassed by the whole situation. Ryan lingered, studying Sarah with curiosity. "Sorry about him. Dr. Harrison's really stressed about the deadline." He hesitated for a moment. "But you said your father studied the project." Sarah nodded and discreetly placed one of the papers she had prepared next to his coffee cup. "Just take a look. If it doesn't make sense, you can toss it." Ryan took the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "What was your father's name?" "William Johnson. He worked on several projects here in Colorado, mostly on smaller dams." "William Johnson," Ryan repeated the name, thoughtful. "I'll look into him." After Ryan left, Sarah was left with a mix of hope and anxiety. Had she done the right thing? What if they really thought she was being pushy? The rest of the day dragged on. Sarah tried to focus on work, but her mind kept circling back to the possibility of helping solve such an important problem. 500,000 people needed that dam. If the project was cancelled, it would be a disaster for the whole region. The next day, Ryan showed up alone at the diner. He went straight to Sarah. "Can I talk to you?" Sarah nodded, nervous. "I looked into your father last night. William Johnson was well known in the field. He worked on 5 smaller dams in the area and never had issues with foundations." Ryan paused. "And I read what you gave me." Sarah's heart raced. "And?" "It makes sense. A lot of sense, actually. The problem is, Dr. Harrison would never accept an idea from, someone without formal training. But if the idea is good, what's the issue? You don't know Dr. Harrison. He's brilliant, but his ego's as big as Colorado. He founded the firm after leaving a major engineering company and is determined to prove he can compete with the big players." Sarah felt a pang of disappointment. "So it's pointless." "I didn't say that." Ryan glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening. "How about you explain the solution to me in detail? If I fully understand it, I can present it as my own idea." The suggestion left Sarah torn. On one hand, solving the problem was what mattered. On the other, it didn't seem fair for Ryan to take credit for an idea that wasn't his. "You take the credit. Look, I know it's not ideal, but think about it. If the solution works, over 500,000 people will have clean water. Isn't that worth more than who gets the credit?" Sarah hesitated. She remembered her father's words. What matters isn't who solves the problem, sweetheart. What matters is that the problem gets solved. All right, but I want to be there when you explain it to the others. That might be tricky. Dr. Harrison, if he wants the solution, he'll have to put up with me. Ryan smiled for the first time since Sarah had met him. You're more stubborn than he is. This might just work. They arranged to meet at Sarah's house on Saturday morning. Ryan wanted to see all of William's notebooks and fully understand the logic behind the solution. When Saturday came, Sarah was nervous. She'd cleaned the whole house and laid out all her father's notebooks on the living room table. Ryan arrived promptly at 9, carrying a folder full of papers. These are the original project blueprints, he explained, spreading the sheets on the table. Now show me what your father figured out. For the next 3 hours, Sarah detailed the solution William had proposed. Ryan asked technical questions, took notes, and gradually his skepticism turned to enthusiasm. This is brilliant, he finally said. Why didn't we think of this? The answer was right in front of us. My father always said the problem with many trained engineers is they only know how to look up at theories and formulas. They forget to look down at what the earth is telling them. Your father was a wise man. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. It had been a long time since anyone spoke of William with such respect. Now, how are we going to present this to Dr. Harrison and Lee? Leave it to me. I'll schedule a meeting for Monday morning. And you're right, you'll be there. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Monday arrived full of tension. Sarah had taken time off from the diner, citing personal matters. She dressed in her best outfit, navy blue dress pants and a white blouse she'd bought for her father's funeral, and arrived at the engineering firm in downtown Denver. The offices of Wilson & Associates Engineering were on the 12th floor of a commercial building. When Sarah entered the reception area, the secretary looked her up and down with obvious disapproval. Do you have an appointment? Yes, with Dr. Harrison, Ryan, and Lee. The secretary checked the schedule, clearly confused. It only lists Ryan Wilson here. What's your name? Sarah Johnson. And you are an engineer? Sarah took a deep breath. No, I'm a waitress. But I have a solution for the Green Valley Dam problem. The secretary blinked several times as if unsure she'd heard correctly. You're joking, right? Just then, Ryan appeared in the hallway. Sarah, so glad you came. Let's go to the conference room. The secretary's expression was priceless. She stood gaping as Ryan treated Sarah with respect and warmth. The conference room was intimidating. A large dark wood table, leather chairs, whiteboards on the walls, and an impressive view of the city. Dr. Harrison and Lee were already there, and the former's expression changed drastically when he saw Sarah enter. Ryan, what is this? He asked, pointing at Sarah as if she were an object. Dr. Harrison, before anything else, I want you to see this, Ryan said, walking to the whiteboard and starting to sketch. I'm not going to waste time with... Please, doctor, just 5 minutes. If it doesn't make sense, I'll ask Sarah to leave myself. Doctor, Harrison crossed his arms, clearly annoyed, but said nothing. Lee seemed curious but cautious. Ryan began explaining the solution, drawing diagrams on the board. As he spoke, Sarah noticed Lee leaning forward, paying closer attention. Dr. Harrison kept his expression guarded, but she could tell he was following the logic. The issue is we're calculating the terrain's resistance based only on current conditions, Ryan continued. But we're not accounting for seasonal variations in the water table. That's basic, Dr. Harrison interrupted. Of course we've considered terrain variations. We have, but superficially. What I'm proposing is a much deeper analysis based on this soil's specific behavior over several years. Ryan kept explaining, and gradually even Dr. Harrison began asking technical questions. Lee was already taking notes. And where did this idea come from? Dr. Harrison finally asked. Ryan looked at Sarah. I'll let Sarah explain this part. Everyone's attention turned to her. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach, but remembered her father and found her courage. My father, William Johnson, studied this project for months before he passed. He had experience with unstable foundations and noticed you were making a basic mistake. Was your father an engineer? Lee asked. He didn't have a degree, but he'd worked in engineering for over 20 years. He learned on the job. Doctor, Harrison let out a scornful laugh. So you're saying a self-taught worker found a mistake 3 certified engineers couldn't spot? That's exactly right, Sarah replied, staying calm. And if you had a little less pride and a little more humility, you would have solved this problem long ago. The silence that followed was tense. Dr. Harrison turned red with anger. How dare you? Harrison, calm down, Lee interrupted. Let's focus on the solution. Does the idea make sense? Doctor, Harrison fell silent for a long moment, clearly torn between his pride and his professional honesty. It makes sense, he finally admitted, as if the words were costly. But still, I can't accept that. That a waitress is smarter than you. Sarah Johnson finished his sentence. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, it's written all over your face. Ryan tried to intervene. Everyone, let's stay focused. What matters is that we have a viable solution. Viable, maybe, said Dr. Harrison. But who's going to implement it? Who'll take technical responsibility, her? He pointed at Sarah. I will, Lee said, surprising everyone. If Sarah helps me understand all the details, I'll take technical responsibility for the implementation. Dr. Harrison looked at Lee as if he'd lost his mind. Lee, you can't be serious. I am, and I'll tell you why. Lee stood and walked to the whiteboard. This solution isn't just viable. It's brilliant. It's simple, elegant, and completely solves our problem. And if it works, it'll save the project and our reputations. And if it doesn't, the responsibility is mine. But I'm certain it will work. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude toward Lee. It was the first time someone besides Ryan had treated her ideas with the respect they deserved. Fine, Dr. Harrison finally said, but I want everything documented. Every step, every calculation, every modification. And I want daily progress reports. No problem, Lee agreed. Sarah, can you join us at the construction site tomorrow? Sarah nodded, still hardly believing what was happening. I just need to get time off work. Don't worry about that, Ryan said. We'll compensate you for any lost wages. Leaving the office, Sarah felt like she was in a dream. In less than a week, she'd gone from an overlooked waitress to a technical consultant on a $1 million project. But at the same time, she felt the weight of responsibility. What if the solution didn't work? What if she was wrong? That night at home, she reread all her father's notebooks once more. William Johnson had been meticulous in his observations. The calculations were correct, the logic sound. Still, Sarah slept poorly, dreaming of possible disasters and failures. The next morning, she went to the diner to talk to her boss, Mr. Thompson. Time off in the middle of the week? Sarah, you know this is our busiest season, he grumbled. I know, Mr. Thompson, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It might mean a career change. A career change? For what? Sarah hesitated. How could she explain that she'd suddenly become a technical engineering consultant? It's a long story, but I promise I'll make up the lost hours. Mr. Thompson sighed. Fine, but if this becomes a habit, we'll need to have a serious talk. At 8 in the morning, Sarah was at the Green Valley Dam construction site. It was her first time seeing the project up close, and she was awed by its scale. Hundreds of workers, massive machinery, concrete structures rising like monuments. Lee was waiting at the entrance, wearing a yellow hard hat and reflective vest. Good morning, Sarah. Ready to see the problem firsthand? He gave her a hard hat and vest and led her to the area with the problematic foundations. Sarah immediately recognized the terrain her father had described in his notebooks. It's exactly like he said, she murmured. Like who said? My father described this terrain in perfect detail. He had never been here, but based on the technical reports he obtained, he mapped out the entire area. Lee showed her the spots where they were having issues. In some areas, the ground had settled slightly, causing cracks in the structure. In others, the foundation wasn't setting properly. The schedule calls for this part to be finished by the end of the month, Lee explained. If we can't stabilize the foundation by then, we'll have to tear it all down and start over. That would mean a delay of at least 6 months and extra costs in the millions of dollars. Sarah studied the area carefully, comparing what she saw with her father's notes. Everything matched perfectly. "The solution will work," she said confidently, "but we'll need some targeted modifications in a few spots." "What kind of modifications?" Sarah pointed to a specific area. "Here, the ground is slightly different from what was projected in the original plan. We'll need additional drainage." Lee took note of everything. Over the next few hours, they walked through the entire problem area, with Sarah identifying points that needed adjustments to the original solution. In the afternoon, they returned to the office to prepare the implementation plan. Dr. Harrison was there, waiting for a report. "So?" he asked, trying to mask his anxiety. "The solution will work," Lee replied, "but we'll need a few modifications to the original plan." "What kind of modifications, and how much will that cost?" Lee presented Sarah's observations. To her surprise, Dr. Harrison listened carefully, asking relevant technical questions. "The additional costs are minimal," Lee concluded. "Far less than demolition and rebuilding." "And the schedule? If we start tomorrow, we can finish on time." Dr. Harrison fell silent for a moment, thoughtful. "All right, let's move forward, but I want daily reports, as agreed." The implementation began the next morning. Sarah had gotten a week's leave from the diner and was on site every day, guiding the workers and overseeing each step of the process. On the first day, everything went smoothly. The foundation modifications were implemented as planned, and the ground responded well. On the second day, an unexpected problem arose. One of the drainage machines broke down, delaying the schedule. "We'll have to bring in a machine from another site," the foreman said, "but it could take 2 days." "We don't have 2 days," Lee replied nervously. Sarah assessed the situation. She remembered her father's advice about solving drainage issues with alternative equipment. "What if we use smaller pumps instead of one big machine?" she suggested. "Smaller pumps? That'll take much longer." "Not necessarily. If we position several pumps at strategic points, we can achieve the same result, maybe even faster." Lee considered the idea. Worth a try, better than waiting 2 days. The improvised solution worked perfectly. Instead of falling behind, they finished the drainage half a day ahead of schedule. On the third day, an even bigger problem emerged. While excavating for the new foundation, the workers hit a massive rock right in the middle of the work area. "This wasn't in the geological survey," the foreman said, scratching his head. "We'll need explosives to remove it." "Explosives?" Lee turned pale. "That'll set us back at least a week, not to mention the costs and permits required." Sarah approached the rock and examined it closely. It was large but not solid. There were natural fissures that could be exploited. "We don't need to blast it," she said. "We can split this rock using wedges and pneumatic hammers. It'll take longer, but it's much safer and doesn't require special permits." "Are you sure?" "My father always used this technique. It's all about finding the right points to apply pressure." Sarah guided the workers on where to place the wedges. Within 2 hours, the rock was split into smaller pieces that could be easily removed. Lee was impressed. "Where did you learn this?" "By watching my father work. He always said that with patience and knowledge, any obstacle can be overcome." By the 4th day, everything was going perfectly. The new foundation was taking shape, and the ground was responding exactly as William had predicted. That's when Dr. Harrison showed up at the construction site. It was the first time he'd come in person to check on the progress. Sarah was instructing a team on installing a monitoring system when she saw him approach. She braced herself for another confrontation. "How are things going?" he asked Lee, completely ignoring Sarah. "Very well. We're on schedule, within budget, and the solution is working perfectly." Dr. Harrison scrutinized the work with a critical eye. Sarah could tell he was looking for flaws, something to criticize. "And who's overseeing the technical aspects?" he asked. "I'm responsible for the technical side, but Sarah has been providing valuable guidance on implementation." "Valuable guidance," Dr. Harrison repeated with a sarcastic tone. "What kind of guidance can a waitress give about engineering?" Sarah felt anger rising, but kept her composure. "The kind of guidance that kept this project from failing," she replied calmly. That remains to be seen. Just then the foreman approached. Dr. Harrison, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to thank you for the technical guidance we've been receiving. In 15 years of construction, I've never seen anyone understand ground behavior as well as Mrs. Johnson. Dr. Harrison's expression shifted slightly. Clearly, he hadn't expected to hear that. It's true, the foreman continued. She has an incredible eye. She spots problems before they even happen. Other workers gathered, curious to meet the doctor who had arrived. Without realizing it, they began sharing how Sarah had solved various small issues throughout the week. She taught us a technique to identify weak spots in the ground just by looking, one said. And what about the rock? Brilliant, added another. Dr. Harrison listened silently, his expression growing more thoughtful. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. By the 5th day, the implementation was nearly complete. Only final adjustments and strength tests remained. Sarah accompanied Lee during the tests, carefully noting all the results. The numbers are perfect, Lee said, smiling. The ground strength is 15% above what we needed. My father always said the secret was working with nature, not against it, Sarah replied. Your father truly was a genius. At lunch, Dr. Harrison approached the table where Sarah and Lee were eating. May I join you? He asked. Sarah nodded, surprised. Dr. Harrison was silent for a moment, nervously picking at his sandwich. I owe you an apology, he finally said. To you and to your father's memory. Sarah looked at him, startled. I always believed knowledge only came from academia, he continued. That a degree equaled competence, but you proved me wrong. Dr. Harrison, let me finish. He raised his hand. I researched your father last night. William Johnson worked on some of the most challenging projects in the region. Never had a foundation issue, never missed a deadline. And from the accounts I've read, he was respected by everyone who worked with him. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. Thank you for saying that. No need to thank me. I'm just acknowledging the truth. Dr. Harrison hesitated for a moment, and now I have a proposal for you. What proposal? I'd like you to consider working with us, officially. Sarah nearly choked on her soda. What do you mean? We're thinking of creating a position for a technical consultant specializing in foundations, someone with hands-on knowledge who can complement our theoretical training. But I don't have a degree. So what? After this week, its clear competence has nothing to do with a piece of paper on the wall. Lee nodded enthusiastically. That's a great idea, Harrison. It would be wonderful to have someone with Sarah's practical experience on our team. Sarah fell silent, processing the offer. It was an incredible opportunity, but also intimidating. Can I think about it? Of course. Take your time. On the 6th day, the final tests were completed. All parameters were within specifications, and the foundation was even more solid than the original design had called for. We did it, said Lee, clapping. Construction can proceed as planned. The news spread quickly through the site. The workers celebrated, relieved they wouldn't have to tear everything down and start over. Dr. Harrison called Miller Construction to deliver the good news. Yes, Mr. Thompson. Problem solved. The project is cleared to continue. No, sir, there won't be any delays or extra costs. Yes, we can guarantee the solution is permanent. When he hung up, he was smiling. The construction company is very pleased. They want to sign new contracts with us. Great, said Ryan. Our reputation is saved. More than saved, Dr. Harrison corrected. It's stronger. Word that we solved such a complex problem will spread in the industry. Sarah watched the celebration with mixed feelings. She was happy the solution had worked, but sad her involvement in the project was ending. On the 7th day, a small ceremony was held at the site to mark the successful completion of the foundation phase. Representatives from Miller Construction, the City Council, and even some local journalists were present. Dr. Harrison gave a speech about the project's importance to the region and how his team had overcome a complex technical challenge. Sarah noticed he didn't mention her contribution or her father's. She wasn't surprised, but she still felt a pang of disappointment. After the ceremony, Ryan approached her. You weren't upset by Dr. Harrison's speech? Not really. I knew it would be like that. Well, maybe this will help change your mind about our job offer. How so? Dr. Harrison might be changing, but he's still got a lot of pride. Working with him can be complicated. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I'm still deciding. That night at home, Sarah sat at the table where her father used to work. His notebooks were still there, filled with notes and sketches. She opened one and found a page she'd never seen before. A letter addressed to her. My dear daughter, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you've found these notebooks. I hope they can be useful to you in some way. I know you've always admired my work, even if you didn't fully understand what I did. I want you to know you have a natural talent for engineering. The few times we talked about my projects, your questions and observations showed an intuitive understanding many degreed engineers don't have. Don't let anyone convince you you're not capable just because you lack a diploma. True knowledge comes from curiosity, observation, and practice. You have all three. If the day comes when you have the chance to use what you learned from me, don't hesitate. The world needs people who understand that engineering isn't just about numbers and formulas. It's about understanding how things work, how to solve problems, how to make people's lives better. Whatever path you choose, know that I'm proud of you. With all my love, Dad. Sarah cried as she read the letter. It was as if her father were right there, guiding her once more. The next day, she returned to the diner. Her week of leave was over, and it was time to get back to her routine. So, Mr. Thompson asked, how was your little adventure? It worked. The problem was solved. That's good. Now you can focus on real work again. Sarah smiled but didn't reply. Throughout the day, she waited tables, cleared dishes, and served customers just as she always did. But her mind was somewhere else. By late afternoon, Ryan showed up at the diner. I came to hear your answer about our offer. Sarah led him to a corner table, away from the other customers. I've decided I won't accept. Ryan looked disappointed. Can I ask why? Several reasons. First, I like my job here. It's simple, but it's honest. Second, I don't want to spend my whole life proving I'm competent to people who think competence is measured by a diploma. But you could contribute to so many projects, and I will, just in my own way. Ryan looked confused. What do you mean? Sarah smiled. Remember when you said word would spread in the industry about how we fixed the damn issue? I do. Well, sooner or later, other engineers will run into similar problems. And when they do, they'll come looking for me. Here? At the diner? Why not? This place has one advantage your office doesn't. What's that? People relax here. They let their guard down, talk about problems without worrying they'll look incompetent. It's the perfect setting for someone who wants to understand the real challenges of a project. Ryan laughed. You want to turn this diner into an engineering consulting office? Not exactly. I want to keep being a waitress, but if someone needs help with foundations or structures, I'll be here ready to help. And how will people know that? The way it's always worked in engineering, word of mouth. If I solve problems well, the news will spread on its own. Ryan was impressed by the simplicity and cleverness of the plan. This could work. Actually, it could work really well. It will work. And you know what's best? I'll still be myself. I won't have to pretend to be something I'm not just to impress anyone. A few weeks later, Sarah's prediction began to come true. An engineer from another company showed up at the diner, asking for her. He'd heard about the solution for the Green Valley Dam and wanted her opinion on a similar issue with a project in Boulder. Sarah helped him during lunch, listening carefully as he described the problem. Later, on her break, she jotted down some suggestions on a napkin and handed it to him. Will this work? The engineer asked. It can, but you'll need to adapt it for the specific conditions of your site. 2 weeks later, he returned to thank her. The solution had worked perfectly. Word spread. Other engineers started showing up, some discreetly, others more openly. Sarah helped them all with the same patience and humility, always willing to share the knowledge she'd inherited from her father. Mr. Thompson, initially skeptical, soon realized these engineers were bringing more customers to the diner. Not only did he start supporting Sarah's consultations, but he even created a special menu for technical meetings. "Who would have thought," he remarked one day, "my waitress turned into an engineering consultant. And she didn't even have to quit her job." Sarah laughed at these remarks, but deep down, she was very pleased with her choice. She had found a way to honor her father's memory, use her knowledge to help others, and still maintain her identity and simplicity. A few months later, Dr. Harrison showed up at the diner. Sarah was surprised to see him. "Dr. Harrison, what brings you here?" "I heard you've become the most sought-after technical consultant in the area," he said with a genuine smile. "That's an exaggeration. I just help when I can." "False modesty doesn't suit you, Sarah. I came here for 2 reasons. What are they?" "First, to give you some news. The Green Valley Dam is working perfectly, even better than the original project predicted. Your solution was a complete success." Sarah felt a wave of pride and relief. "And the second reason? I have a new project, complex, challenging, and I need your opinion. Here at the diner? Right here at the diner, if you'll allow me, of course." Sarah smiled. "Of course. Can I serve you some coffee while we talk?" "Absolutely. And this time I promise to listen to everything you have to say. No interruptions, no preconceptions." As she poured the coffee, Sarah reflected on how her life had changed. She was still a waitress, still worked at the same diner, still wore the same uniform. But now she was also something more, the person who honored William Johnson's memory by sharing her knowledge and wisdom with those who needed it. Besides, Harrison spread some papers on the table, and Sarah leaned over them studying the new challenge. It was a bridge project on rocky terrain, completely different from the dam, but she could see some familiar principles. "What do you think?" asked Dr. Harrison. Sarah studied the drawings for a few minutes, remembering her conversations with her father about different types of terrain and structures. "Interesting," she finally said. "Complex, but not impossible. I'll need a few days to analyze it carefully. No rush, and Sarah, yes, thank you for teaching me that knowledge doesn't come with a diploma and that wisdom often comes from the most unexpected places." Sarah smiled, recalling her father's words. "What matters isn't who solves the problem, my dear. What matters is that the problem gets solved." She had found her way to solve problems, honor her father's memory, and make a difference in the world. And best of all, she had managed to do it all without losing her essence, her simplicity, her humanity. The diner remained busy, customers still ordered coffee and food, and Sarah was still the dedicated, attentive waitress she'd always been. But now, between tables, she was also the consultant who helped build bridges, dams, and a better future for her community. It was exactly what William Johnson would have wanted. Knowledge being used to serve people, engineering practiced with humility and wisdom, and a daughter honoring her father's legacy in the most beautiful way possible. As the sun set over Denver, Sarah continued her work, knowing that every problem solved, every solution found was a way to keep her father's memory and teachings alive. And that sometimes the most important answers come from the simplest places, the humblest people, and the most unlikely conversations. The end. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story of perseverance and wisdom? Do you believe knowledge can come from anywhere, regardless of titles or diplomas? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.